Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our Testimony Tuesday program. I am here tonight with my dear friend, Cathy Krafve. Cathy, will you please join our program and tell us a little bit about yourself and the involvement that you have with you have your hands on lots of things. So tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got involved with CARE.
BJ, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me to share my testimony. These days, I'm really highly involved in media stuff. I've got a couple of books coming out soon. I host a program called Fireside Talk Radio. We have over 2 million downloads of our podcast every year. So there's all this stuff I'm doing about conversations. But when you talk about my testimony, it's really interesting how my experience with Jesus and my experience with an abortion has led me to this moment. If I hadn't obeyed God way back when, I wouldn't be doing all this cool stuff I'm getting to do right now and all these great people I get to interview. So isn't that interesting how that happens?
I love that. It goes to prove that God does not waste any of our ugly. And I say that all the time. He loves us so much. And I don't believe that because you were disobedient, now you get to do this. But even though you were disobedient, look how God can use all of that. He's so powerful and so good to us.
It's so true. I call my stories, and once I started opening up and telling people about my abortion, what I discovered is almost every woman I knew had all these experiences that were grieving to them. Some of them they did to themselves, and sometimes other people really hurt them in a way that was just not right. And so they were victims, even as small children, of sexual assault or whatever, but they had those stories weighing on their hearts. So now because God steps in and he changes everything, I now call those stories sacred stories. And I kind of have to explain it because sometimes people don't get it. How can your abortion story be sacred? But the truth is, I was so confused and hurt when I found out I was having an unplanned child that I just reacted in such a scared way. And I went to the abortion clinic and chose that option, and then lived to regret it forever, hid it for a long time. So I don't know how much of that you want me to share. BJ, we have a limited amount of time and I have so much story. I share it often now. So which piece would you like to hear?
I think take me back to, because we know that you've had an abortion, and take me back to that season and probably after your abortion. How did the abortion affect you? That's kind of what I want to know, because what I do know is that so many of us hurt so similarly. Is that a word?
Yeah.
And so I think that as a woman that kept my secret of abortion for so long myself, that I felt like I was the only one that felt this way. And so for the ladies that are watching tonight, I want them to hear this beautiful, Jesus-loving woman with sassy red glasses telling how she felt, and maybe they will relate and understand that they're not alone. So do you mind taking us there and expressing how you felt after your abortion?
There's so much about that I could share, but one thing is I understood, 20 years ago when post-traumatic stress disorder became something that people were talking about, I understood it instantly, because the day I had the abortion, like for years, as long as I kept it a secret, I could actually smell the clinic. I could feel those lights. There was something weird about the way my fear and anxiety reacted with the light in the room. So anytime the word abortion would come up, I would experience all those symptoms. Like I was back at the clinic the day of, experiencing all the anxiety, all the fear, all the sorrow. And for many years, I didn't even give myself a permission to feel sorry. So there was so much pain wrapped in that it took a while to get it unwrapped. One thing that happened, I was so fortunate because CARE did not exist. I was so grateful to get to be on the board that founded CARE with our dear friend Grace English. But that was years ahead. When I had my abortion, that wasn't there. But I found a great Bible study of other women who'd been through abortion, and they kind of walked me through some of my pain. But one of my choices was, would I tell my close girlfriends? And I made the decision to tell one trustworthy friend. And what I discovered was, oh my gosh, she didn't reject me. She really had compassion for me and wanted to help me get my hurt dealt with before. The only person who could really help me was God. Before Jesus, I needed to go before him and let him forgive me and then forgive myself. So that was what I discovered. If I trusted trustworthy women, they responded that way. I want to share one thing because I think this is so important now, looking back 40 something years later. One of my friends, one of the first people I told, said to me, Cathy, you are going to know things about forgiveness that other people will not ever figure out till they're so much older. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I was already, I'm going to cry thinking about this. I was already beginning to understand a lot about forgiveness because I had so much self-forgiveness that I needed. I was rejecting myself because of my decision. So I did learn a lot about forgiveness really early on. One thing I learned is that if you hide that, if you find yourself trying to hide a sin or hide a mistake or hide something someone else has done to you, that means that you're experiencing shame. And that's another layer of something that you need to bring out into the open and think about and talk about with somebody trustworthy.
I
So,
love it.
isn't that great? I mean, that's just a simple thing. And all these years later, what I know now is I began to share my story years ago. Women began to share their stories with me. So over the years, I've had all these what I consider sacred stories collected, and I would never have ever experienced those deep companionship, authentic, real relationships if I kept hiding my secret. So I'm so glad that there were women available to listen to me and to love me through that process of so much pain. It's one of my favorite things we do at Care. I just love that about the ministry.
So would you say that care does that well? How do we help women well that are hurting
Yeah,
from abortion?
I loved when we got started. Grace was she's such a genius anyway. And she has, being a medical doctor, she has that great compassionate heart. And she tended to attract people like you, BJ. I remember when you came on the board, I'd already rolled off, but I was so excited about you. And we were so happy when you decided that you would be willing to be the director of it. I don't even know your official title, I just know your heart. So, but one thing that we knew from the beginning is there was already too much politics and there was too many ways to disagree once you politicize the issue. But when you talk to women one on one and hear their sacred stories, what you find out is there's a lot of room for agreement and unity and compassion. And so we knew from the beginning that was the direction we wanted to go. We didn't want to be political, we wanted to be full of compassion. So Grace challenged me to share my story in public, and I was like, uh-oh, I knew I was hiding. You know, I might share it with my best friend, but I'm not going to share this in public. So that told me I have another layer that I need to let Jesus forgive me. And I need to accept that forgiveness and really walk in it. Now, if I had not done that today, I would not be hosting this amazing talk radio program where we bring in all these amazing people. And you've been on my show. People should look for it. It's called Fireside Talk Radio. If you want to know more about BJ Garrett or Care, you should find that episode. It was amazing what you shared. So powerful.
Thank you.
I don't want to hog the conversation, BJ, so just interrupt me. But there's one lady that came on our show, and I quote her all the time. Her name is Sandra Bristow. And she said this quote, it's one of my favorite ever. She said, isolation is the place where Satan takes us before he goes in for the kill.
Wow, that's good.
I know.
That is
I
good.
know. Yeah.
And as supportives, we isolate ourselves. We don't want, because we feel like everyone that sees us is going to know this big, ugly thing that we did and that we experienced. So,
Yeah.
wow, that is good. It's really
What
good.
I think is so interesting about that is we're busy hiding in the bushes, like isolating ourselves. And really, Jesus is just like welcoming us into his presence with his other beloved daughters. And I don't want to forget the sons, his beloved sons, because one thing Kara does that it just blows my mind. One thing we did not anticipate when we started is we did not know how many men were grieving over abortions. And men are so powerless sometimes. They can, I mean, they can abuse their power and then live to regret that. But they also, sometimes they don't even have a choice. So there
Right.
was all this grief that went unaddressed among men. They were still protecting the secret of the woman that they might have loved at one time or maybe still loved. So that was really a complicated thing to untangle. And I love the way Kara has done that so beautifully.
You bring that up, and it's funny because just the other day, I was actually at the dentist getting my teeth cleaned, and the hygienist who I love, she was asking me about, she's like, now, what do you do again? And that's my favorite question when anybody will ask me what I do, because no one is prepared to hear abortion recovery, right?
Oh my
And
gosh.
so I tried to tell her about care, and that we help men and women who have been hurt by abortion, and we educate the community of the truth of its consequences. And she was like, men? You said men? You help men?
Yeah.
Men don't have abortions. And I'm like, oh no, but they father children who are aborted. And we do know that men have the same emotional and spiritual brokenness from
Yeah.
abortion that women can have. I mean, they lose a child as well. And we I
Yes.
hate that abortion has become a political hot topic, because we're not a political organization. We are an organization helping men and women heal from the heartbreak of abortion. But in our world, it is very much my body, my choice as a female, and it really isn't
Yeah.
anything about the child that is lost, or the heartache and the scars and the wounds left over to both parents who
Yeah.
lose the child through abortion. So I love that you bring that up. Thank you very much.
Well, okay. So some of my favorite stories are the ones when we have our gala fundraiser mid-year and the early in the year, and the wives come up there and tell their story, and then their husband comes up because he's seen the change in her heart, and he wants to join her. And now that she has freedom, he no longer required to hide her secret. So he wants to get in a group and he wants to get that kind of freedom. I love those stories. Those are my favorite ones. The other thing Kara has done so beautifully is really start these dynamic conversations in churches. Before, when I was still hiding my secret years ago, the 80s, all people could do was talk about abortion and how bad it was, and they would mention that in church and I would feel like vomiting. And now when we talk about it in church, especially in our region, when we first said we wanted to talk to churches, some of the pastors were really skittish. They weren't sure they could trust us. But we don't get up there and judge anybody. We just get up there and tell our story. And because we do that, I love this. Every one of us knows somebody who's heard our testimony and made a decision to have their baby. And that's for some women, that's a lot of babies that are born because their testimony went out. So I love that because it's so loving. It's not political at all, but it's really accomplishing what everybody, pro-choice, pro-life, who cares? Everybody wants those babies to have life and to have a chance. And we do that without ever judging anyone. We just get up there and tell the truth about us. I say how much I would love to have an older child right now. And my own children say they wish they had that older sibling. So we just share that. It's
Yeah,
just true. And
I love
I forgive myself. My kids don't hold it against me at all. They know Jesus died for that. You know, not to minimize his death at all, but to say his death is that powerful.
Yeah, I love that. I love, you have been such an encourager to me from the moment I came on the board, and then when the board then hired me as the first executive director. I mean, you have just come along beside me, and you have always encouraged me. And I love your heart from
Mhm.
day one. From the first time I have met you, you have always been about having compassion for
Yeah.
those that are hurting, and
Mhm.
to make sure that how we approach the topic of abortion, because it's a hot topic, right? It is, and
Right.
it is unfortunately so politically charged, and it's hurtful on both sides. But you have so encouraged me to make sure I keep the compassion and the gentleness in our approach as we are trying to reach men and women who, again, who are hurting or that are possibly facing unplanned pregnancies. Because it's not that, we want to save babies, obviously, but it's so much more than just wanting to save lives. We want to prevent the heartache of abortion. And if by hearing our stories, we can help you see the truth of abortion and how it's not this quick fix that the world wants you to believe that it is, that you have a real live child growing inside of you. And if we can help you with real resources and empower you as women and as parents, then we want to do that. And we want to walk that journey with you. And we want you to not hurt like we have hurt, most of us, for decades. How long did you hurt silently before you got first plugged into that first group of women?
Well, I think the average is 7 years, and I think it was about 7 years before. But what happened for me is I had two little girls and I was holding them. I mean, they were toddlers together. They were 16 months apart. Actually, Anna and Ella both co-host my show with me pretty regularly now, and it's so fun when they're on there. Anna's, some of her episodes they're the ones that get downloaded the most. So if you're looking at Fireside Talk Radio, look for Anna Krafve Pierce. But anyway, I was holding them as infants and I wasn't able to enjoy them because I was suddenly aware of what I had lost myself. I lost the opportunity to hold that first baby. And I didn't know what a loss it was because I'd never been a mother before that. And then when Dave and I got married and had children, I was holding his children, our children, and missing that child that I had conceived with someone else. And for me, that was probably about 7 years. I don't know for sure. But I will tell you this, BJ, it's very powerful as a 60-plus-year-old woman to stand up in front of an audience and say, over 40 years ago, I had an abortion. And even though I'm totally forgiven, like I share this sometimes and I forget to let people know ahead of time, I'm fixing to share something really very powerful and sad. And so brace yourself. I just mention it sometimes. I'm so over. That's part of my story, but it's not the whole story.
Right.
Anyway, I mean, God is just that good and Jesus is just that powerful. I don't even think about it much anymore. But to say in front of an audience, I wish even now, as much as I walk in forgiveness, I wish I had that child with me. I don't want to wait till heaven to meet that baby. I mean, if I'd given that child up for adoption, I'd already have a 20-year relationship with him or her. I think her maybe, but that I'd have a 20-year-old relationship with that child at this point. We would have found each other. I would have had a home. The child would have had step siblings welcoming that person into our lives. We would have been overjoyed. But of course, I didn't know that as a 20-year-old.
Right.
So I think that's very powerful when you can stand in front of an audience and say, your life is not at 20, it is not what you think it's going to be at 60. There's a lot that happens and God is good. If you turn your life over to him, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that I have decided to follow him and not my own ideas about life.
Right. So just briefly, and I don't want to get stuck in this area of your story,
Yeah.
but take us back to that season of your life and why did you choose abortion? What was happening in your life to where you did not think you could mother a child?
Yeah, that's interesting. I like to say, I don't know if I like to say this, but I think this is true. You know how there's a stereotype, like people just have abortion for convenience and it's just these independent women that don't want to have babies. I gotta say that was kind of me. Like since I've been in care and come into contact with all the different stories that you and I both, some you know more than I do, but the ones I know of, now I know there's a lot of women that are actually oppressed and forced almost and pressured to have abortion, but that wasn't my story. I'm like on the other end of the spectrum. There's really no excuse for me. I was in college. I knew I was in a relationship and I was basically just I knew I did not want to marry that young man. I obviously should have gotten out of the relationship as soon as I realized that. And I was just so needy and selfish. I just stayed in it and I got pregnant And rather than have to deal with him or his family or my family, I just went to the abortion clinic and ended the pregnancy. But I will tell you, it was one of the harder things I've ever done, most miserable day of my life, probably.
Yeah.
And immediately I regretted it. And I think that's pretty common, but not always. I meet women who've had abortions who tell me they never regretted it. So I think for me and for other women, we just need to really have a heart to understand that if we don't ask the right questions, we're not going to hear the real story.
That's
And
right.
we better not judge it because we really probably don't know.
That's right.
So in my case, I would just say I was probably the poster child for selfishness. And I knew it was a bad decision. I did it anyway because it was more convenient. So I don't know if that helps you or makes other people just cringe, but that's probably the truth.
Well, I mean, but abortion is cringe-worthy, right?
Oh, it's
I
a
mean,
very traumatizing word to even say out loud. I actually accidentally, I have some grown women in my life who I love, and I didn't realize they didn't know. And I just mentioned it casually to them, and I had to backtrack because, that they were so gracious to me, but they did not know, and I didn't prepare them for what I was about to tell them.
wow,
It's
wow.
a big bomb to drop on people.
Yeah. I mean, and I can relate to that because so often for those of us who have received great amounts of healing from our
Mhm.
Lord Jesus Christ, it no longer defines who we are. And for so many years of being in bondage of abortion and under the chains and the weight and the burden of the guilt and the shame and all of the things that come along with that, when you finally get freedom from that and you're allowed to live and I mean, I sound like a broken record probably at times, but I am finally free to live
Yes.
fully how Christ had intended and how he wants me to.
Yes.
That it no longer, I mean, people say, how can you share your story and you're not just crying all the time? Well, because I mean, I do get emotional at times because it is, I mean, I took two of my own children's lives. Like that's a big thing, right? But
Right.
it no longer weighs on me like it once did because I am forgiven. I am truly forgiven. And I do know that at someday I am going to be reunited with my children in heaven, and they're not in heaven, wishing me bad. They're waiting for me as well, and they're with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and He's taking care of them. So, I don't have that burden of guilt any longer.
You
So,
know, I love the book, The Scarlet Letter. And in that book, she ends up with an A for adultery tattooed across her forehead. And in a way, I think of that like A for abortion. So,
yeah,
what has happened, coming back to my friend's insight that I would have understanding about forgiveness, what has happened is I like sometimes people will assume I'm so spiritual. Like, I don't know why they do that, but they do. And whenever that happens, I always say, whoa, I need to talk to you a little bit about me and my past so that I'm not super spiritual. I just walk in a ton of forgiveness.
I love that.
I just walk in it. And it's such a free, great place to be that people assume it's spirituality. And I think in a way it's the real spirituality of not thinking I'm so great, but thinking God is so much greater.
Yes.
He's so great.
I love that. I
I
actually
don't
heard you
know.
share that similar point of view when you did an interview with Stephen
Oh,
um,
yeah.
yeah, like a while back. And I love that interview. I love any interview that I get to hear of you, anyways, either from your own podcast, from Fireside Talk Radio, or from many of the other opportunities that you get asked to speak. Because you share what you've taught me to do is to share with compassion the truth. And I love how you have this just gentle, like you're a very bold personality. And no one that has ever met you thinks, oh, Cathy, so, mild. There's nothing mild about you. You're a big personality. But when it comes to talking about abortion and the pain associated with abortion, you have such a gentle heart and a gentle approach of reaching women just like myself. And so I thank you for that. That is genuinely a gift that I admire and appreciate. And your willingness to always say yes when it comes to talking about abortion and talking about care. And I
Yeah.
just so appreciate you in that area.
Well, you know, we have the two books coming out, and in both of them, I mention care because there's so many examples that just life after life changed because of this amazing ability to have a conversation without all the judgmentalness and all the polarization and just love people where they are. You know, my saddest thing is, I know we have to wrap this up, but there's this stereotype among women that if they talk about it at church, the church will kick them out. And that's never the case. Most of the time, like maybe there's one time that's happened in how many years, but most of the time, like if that happens, you just need to find a new church because that's just not right.
Right, that's
Most
right.
99.99999% of the time of all the women we've ever heard say that, and it's almost all of them, that what happens is when they finally talk about it at the church, the pastor, for one, is relieved because now he has somebody who can talk about it with compassion.
Yes.
Right? I mean, they know the people's stories. They're looking for someone who can help them. And the women in the church, they'll come up to you and go, I've had grandmothers come up to me and say, I had abortion when it was illegal, or I had an abortion. I went with my daughter to abort her child, which I now know was my grandchild. And they need help and comfort too. And care steps up. That's what I love about this ministry, BJ. Y'all, kudos to you. Really, you've just done such a great job of leading it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, okay, so as we wrap up tonight, one last, whatever's on your heart, one last shout out. This is your stage. The internet is your stage. Share what's on your heart.
Well, I'm going to do unto others as I would have wish they would do unto me. Stephen Tillman, Faith and Failures, is the interview you're talking about, and I'm going to send that out in my blog in February because it's, you know, the month we kind of celebrate life. I think, isn't it February or is it January, BJ?
January.
Okay, so I'm going to send that out in January. It's already on my calendar. I'm going to transcribe that and write a blog around he did a fabulous job of interviewing me about my abortion experience and what that taught me. And it's a great, I mean, he has I love his podcast anyway. But also what I want to say is, speaking to people who may be listening tonight, if you are in that 7-year window that so many people get caught in, where they're afraid, they're still hiding in the bushes, they're afraid to talk about it. Maybe you think that if you tell anyone, they'll reject you. And you might even be right. If you tell the wrong person, they might reject you, and you know it because you've already seen that happen. Here's what I want to say to you. Find someone who's trustworthy, and believe me, BJ and I live for these kind of emails. So if you contact us, you will get someone trustworthy who understands. But it may not be us. It may be the person sitting next to you in the pew. 99% of the time when I share my story, the person next to me admits that they've also had an abortion. I thought it was almost 100% of women, because God just kept bringing all those people into my life. He was looking for somebody that would open up about this, and it turned out to be me and BJ and some of our dear friends. But so that's what I want to say to you. If you're listening and you're wondering, what can I do? Start by finding somebody trustworthy and get some help, because you're not alone. I know for sure almost every woman I know, every man I know has sacred stories where God has interrupted the story and changed the ending for redemption and forgiveness and good and peace and joy. And we just invite you to come into this kind of tribe of people and experience that joy for yourself. That's what we want for you.
I love that. Thank you so much, Cathy. And so just as we close out tonight, I want to encourage you again, if you have been hurt by abortion, maybe you didn't have an abortion yourself, maybe your loved one did, maybe you drove someone to the abortion clinic, or maybe you paid the bill for the abortion. But if abortion has hurt you, I want to encourage you to reach out. We have an amazing program that is really tailored to minister to the man and woman hurt by abortion. So please do that. And just as we close out, I just want to remind you that no matter what has been done to you, no matter what you have done to yourself, there is hope and healing in Jesus Christ. Thank you so much for joining us on our weekly Testimony Tuesday program. See you again next week. Thank you, Cathy. You love technology.